She fined a kid for sidewalk chalk, measured grass with a ruler, declared herself queen of a non-existent HOA. Then she called the cops on me for owning a car she wanted. When they raided her house, they found a cork board that looked like a serial killer was trying to recreate my Tuesday routine. I'd barely finished unpacking my coffee mugs when she showed up, arms crossed, smile tighter than a tax audit. "Nice car," she said, eyeing the lucid air in my driveway like it had personally insulted her petunias. "What do you do, if you don't mind me asking?" Her tone made it clear she minded very much. I smiled politely. "I'm in contract law. Just moved here for a new position." That was apparently the wrong answer. Her eyes narrowed like I'd confessed to insider trading. This is a very selective neighborhood. We like to keep things balanced." Whatever that meant, I wasn't sure, but I was suddenly very aware of her clipboard. Clearbrook Hills looked perfect on paper. Manicured lawns, brick mailboxes, wide sidewalks no one used. The listing said no HOA, which was music to my ears. I'd done the urban HOA battle years ago. I was done with citations for unapproved bird feeders. But here I was again, and Karen Lockley had made 3 appearances on my porch, 2 involving subtle financial interrogations and 1 involving binoculars. I thought it was a joke. Surely she was just eccentric. Every neighborhood has one. But then the envelope came. It was wedged under my front door mat, printed in Comic Sans, sealed with a gold sticker that said Clearbrook Hills HOA Resident Conduct Notification. The contents were somehow even less professional than the presentation. "Dear resident," it read, "your recent vehicle acquisition has not been submitted for visual harmony review. Per Article 7, Section 3 of the Clearbrook Guidelines, luxury vehicles must be approved to ensure community coherence." Below it, a fine of $35.00 for visual imbalance and a form asking for a photo of my license plate, VIN, and a written explanation of purchase source. It ended with, "Failure to comply may result in escalation." Escalation to what? I had no idea. Maybe she'd send me a glitter bomb next. I Googled a supposed HOA. Nothing. I called the county records office. They confirmed Clearbrook Hills had never had a homeowners association. I reread the letter twice, then turned it over. In the corner, faint and almost missed, was a watermark, "Prepared by KL." My stomach sank a little. Karen Lockley wasn't part of an HOA. She was the HOA. Self-appointed, unregulated, and from what I could tell, entirely unhinged. I half expected her to show up next wearing a sash that said Neighborhood Orator. The next morning, I caught her taking a picture of my car from across the street while pretending to walk a dog that didn't exist. There was no leash, no dog, just Karen in tennis shoes, squinting at my Lucid like it was smuggling cocaine under the hood. I stepped outside and waved. She didn't wave back. She just shouted across the street, "We'll be reviewing your vehicle this weekend," and marched off like she had backup. I had no idea what that meant, but something told me this was only the beginning and that she hadn't even started getting weird yet. By day 3, it was clear. Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor with a clipboard fetish. She was running a one-woman regime. I did more digging and confirmed with county records what I'd already suspected. Clearbrook Hills had no registered homeowners association, not now, not ever, which meant every letter she sent, every fine she tried to issue, every regulation she quoted with such conviction was pure fan fiction, HOA harassment on autopilot, and she was the author, editor, and enforcement team. I started noticing things I'd brushed off before. The no parking between 2 4 p.m. signs on her side of the street, homemade, laminated, zip-tied to county poles. The speed bump with a caution cone reading Neighborhood Vehicle Integrity Zone, also Karen. Apparently, she'd even printed violation notices for anyone whose trash bins weren't aesthetically aligned. One guy down the block told me she measured his recycling can with a ruler and cited him for bin asymmetry. I thought he was joking until he showed me the photo she left taped to his door with a red circle around the bin and the words "unacceptable" written in Sharpie. Naturally, her obsession pivoted toward my Lucid. At first, it was subtle. She'd slow down when walking by, angle her phone casually, squint like she was inspecting structural flaws. Then it got weird. She slipped a note under my windshield. Your car's energy output is disturbing neighborhood harmony. Charge only between 9 p.m. 6 a.m. Refer to Civic Energy Act guidelines. That law neither does neighborhood harmony output. Then came the accusation this vehicle matches a stolen model reported last month in New Mexico. Consider verifying its provenance. No source, no proof, just a passive-aggressive post-it of paranoia. I started documenting her behavior. My phone gallery became a catalog of Karenisms. Her snapping pictures from behind a mailbox, her walking along flamingo on a leash, her crouched behind a bush with a laser measure. One morning, I caught her kneeling by my curb with a tape measure stretched across the pavement. I stepped outside and asked if she'd lost something. She looked up and said, "You're parked 2.3 inches past regulation line." I asked what regulation she was referring to. She said, "The one in our Community Visual Cohesion Charter." I told her that sounded made up. She smiled and replied, "Only to those who aren't initiated." The moment that cemented it was Thursday. I was in the middle of a client's Zoom call when I caught movement outside my window. There was Karen, standing by my fence, holding her phone with one hand and a Stanley tape measure with the other, meticulously recording a video while announcing, "Unregistered EV, charging outside, permitted hours, visual disturbance high." It would have been absurd if it wasn't so real. I watched in disbelief as she paused the recording, looked directly into my camera, and mouthed, "We're watching you." For a second, I wondered who "we" was. But as I stared into her cold stare framed by a perfectly manicured hedge, I realized this wasn't just eccentricity anymore. This was delusion in a power suit. What I didn't know yet was just how far she'd take it. I had just poured a cup of coffee when I heard the shouting. Karen's voice cut through the suburban silence like a siren dipped in Chardonnay rage. "That's the one! That's Emily's car!" I stepped outside in time to see her standing in the middle of my driveway, pointing at my Lucid like it was an active crime scene. She turned to the invisible audience in her head, or perhaps her TikTok followers, and shouted, "This man is in possession of a stolen vehicle. I'm calling the authorities." Then, just to drive it home, she added, "And I'm invoking neighborhood justice protocol," whatever that meant. I stayed calm. I'd had depositions go worse than this. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "I own this car. I have the title, the registration, a bill of sale." "That's exactly what a thief would say," she barked. Then she dialed 911 on speakerphone and narrated the situation like she was hosting a true crime podcast. "Yes, officer, I located the vehicle. It's a silver Lucid Air, VIN ending in 359. It was stolen 2 months ago from my niece, Emily Lockley, in Santa Fe." "Yes, I'm certain. I'm staring at it right now." I blinked. Santa Fe? Emily? Was I in a Lifetime movie and no one told me? Karen was prepared, or so she thought. As the cops pulled up, she pulled a plastic folder from her tote bag and marched toward them like a prosecutor delivering a closing statement. "Here's the proof," she declared, handing over a sheet of paper printed on cheap stock with what I swear was a Lucid logo copied and pasted from Google Images. The alignment was off. The text read, "Certificate of vehicle belonging to Emily Lockley." It looked like a fourth grader's book report on car theft. The officer looked from the paper to Karen, then to me. "You have your documents, sir?" I nodded and handed over my registration, bill of sale, and insurance, all with matching VINs, properly filed, notarized, and real. Karen, undeterred by reality, leaned into the officer's shoulder. "You know, he's good. He probably forged those. Criminals are getting more clever. This one's organized. Look at him. He's too calm." I was starting to feel like I was auditioning for a community theater version of Law and Order, HOA Victims Unit. The older officer looked at me, his face unreadable. "Do you mind if we verify the VIN on the vehicle, just to be thorough?" "Of course," I said, unlocking the car with my key fob in full view. The Lucid chirped, lights blinked. Karen gasped as if I'd just used dark magic. "See, he hacked it." The officer read the VIN, checked it against my paperwork, and nodded. "It matches. Clean title, no outstanding reports or claims in the system." Karen's smile wavered but didn't disappear. "That's because the theft wasn't officially reported yet. Emily's in Europe. She asked me to track it down for her. I'm acting under verbal power of attorney." She sounded proud, like she'd passed a bar exam in her head. The younger officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, we'll need to see that documentation too if it exists." Karen hesitated. "It's on my home printer, but it's real, I swear." I thought that would be the end of it. But Karen wasn't done. As the officers started walking back to their cruiser, she called after them. "You're making a mistake. He's lying. He probably sells stolen EVs on the dark web." The older cop paused. "Ma'am, please return to your property." Karen turned toward me, her voice lowering to a hiss. "You're not fooling me, Evan Turner. You think your fancy car and smug little lawyer face can hide what you are, but I see through you." She pointed at her eyes, then at me. "This isn't over. I'd handle hostile clients, litigation bullies, even SEC agents. But this was the first time I feared for my sanity more than my safety. And somehow I knew she was just getting started. I thought maybe the drama had peaked. Maybe the ridiculousness of Karen's DIY police report and Microsoft Word vehicle certificate had embarrassed her into retreat. But I underestimated just how deep her rabbit hole went. One Tuesday afternoon, I left work early after a client canceled last minute. As I pulled into my driveway, something felt off. My garage door was halfway open. At first, I assumed the sensor had glitched until I saw a figure step out from the shadows, my iPad in hand. Karen, in my garage, looking satisfied like she'd just finished judging a science fair project. She froze when she saw me, but only for a second. "Oh, even," she said with a sugar-sweet voice that couldn't hide the steel underneath. "I was just inspecting the VIN for verification purposes. Nothing to worry about." She lifted the iPad as if it were a badge. "The HOA has the right to perform unannounced inspections on suspicious assets." I blinked. "You're in my garage." "Technically," she said, glancing at the concrete floor, "your garage is visible from the sidewalk and your door was open. That constitutes implied access." My jaw tightened. "Get off my property now." She shrugged, casually brushing past me like we were in a shared office space. I reviewed the security footage that evening. It showed Karen pacing up and down the sidewalk, pausing, then approaching my garage once she was sure no one was around. She slipped under the half-closed door, spent several minutes circling my Lucid, crouched near the windshield, zooming in on the VI with her iPad. Then this part chilled me. She pulled a key ring from her pocket and tried each one against my driver's side door, one by one. I hadn't noticed any damage, but the footage was clear. This wasn't curiosity. It was premeditated. Trespassing. I called the police. When the officers arrived, I gave them the footage, a copy of her fake violation notices, and a printout of her previous false report. They watched in silence, faces neutral, but brows slowly rising. "And she says she represents the HOA?" one asked. "Yes," I replied. "The one that doesn't exist." The officers nodded grimly. One of them radioed in to check if Karen had any previous reports against her. As they went to speak with her, I stayed on the porch, close enough to overhear, far enough not to provoke. 10 minutes later, they returned. "Mr. Turner," the older one said, "we did find something unusual in her bag." He held up a photocopy of a hand-drawn map of my house. "She had this. Looks like your floor plan, labeled with notes and a daily schedule." I stared at it. She had drawn, in my morning coffee time, my estimated commute window, even labeled garage usually open tilted 5:45 p.m. My skin crawled. "We're going to file an incident report," the officer continued. "She's claiming she was acting as an authorized safety monitor for the HOA, but we're escalating this to a possible unlawful entry and attempted tampering." Karen, standing across the lawn, didn't look concerned. She looked smug. "He's hiding something," she called out. "Why else would he overreact to a simple inspection?" I wanted to laugh, scream, and bolt all at once, but instead, I just nodded to the officer. "Let me know what you need. I'll cooperate fully." What I didn't say aloud was what was truly bothering me. She had keys. She had my schedule, and she was just getting started. After the garage incident, I installed stronger locks and started double-checking my door every time I left a room. But while I was fortifying the inside of my home, Karen was busy waging a public relations war on the outside. Within days, I began noticing neighbors giving me sideways glances. One jogger crossed the street when he saw me watering my plants. A woman I had chatted with about recycling bins now refused eye contact. Then someone forwarded me a screenshot from the neighborhood's next-door app. Karen had posted a full-length expose titled "Stolen E in Our Midst Urgent Community Alert," with a photo of my car, my address blurred just enough to be deniable, and the sentence, Be cautious. This man may be part of a cross-state vehicle fraud ring. Law enforcement is involved. She signed it KL HOA Safety Chair, of course. I tried to respond on the app, but she'd already blocked me. Comments ranged from, we always knew something was off, to maybe he just has bad parking habits. A few neighbors defended me, but they were drowned out by Karen's flurry of follow-up posts, each more dramatic than the last. One even featured a grainy screenshot from her phone camera, me stepping out of my car. The caption, suspect caught returning to scene. I laughed out loud, then I stopped laughing because people were believing her. I caught one guy photographing my plates and another pretending to stretch while clearly filming my driveway. I was living in a low-budget episode of Dateline, delusional suburbia. The climax came during the neighborhood's 4th of July barbecue. I showed up late, figuring I could grab a hot dog, wave politely, and keep it moving. But Karen had other plans. As I approached the grill area, she turned to the crowd and raised her glass of sparkling cider like she was about to toast the bride. Before we enjoy our freedom, she said dramatically, I feel it's my duty to inform you that a stolen vehicle, yes, the Lucid, is currently parked within our borders. Every gasp, someone actually dropped a paper plate. I am cooperating with federal authorities, she continued, and I urge everyone to remain vigilant. These operations are often deeper than they appear. I stood there frozen, holding a soda can like it was a grenade. Someone muttered, is that the guy? And a few heads turned my way. Enough was enough. I left the party, went home, and printed out full-color screenshots from my security footage. Karen inside my garage, trying her keys, photographing my car, measuring my driveway. The next morning, I slid them into folders, each labeled For Your Awareness, False Claims and Trespassing by KL. Then I did what any normal person would do. I delivered them door to door, wearing a collared shirt and a deadpan expression. I didn't say much, just handed them the folder and said, thought you should have the full story. People opened them, some blinked, some winced. One guy said, wait, she had a map of your house? Yes, she did. By the end of the week, the tide had started to shift. Karen's posts were still going up, but now they were met with skepticism. One neighbor commented, didn't you just accuse the UPS driver of being a spy last month? Another posted, just got my violation notice for having sunflowers, starting to question things. It was working, slowly, but Karen wasn't backing down. No, her next move would be bolder, riskier, and even more unhinged. I knew this because I caught her at 6:47 a.m. crawling under my hedge with a GoPro strapped to her chest. I caught her crawling under my hedge wearing a GoPro and still hesitated to call the police. That's how numb I'd become to the madness. But when the footage from my porch cam revealed she wasn't just trespassing, she was taping a tiny black object to the underside of my Lucid, I knew it had gone from weird to criminal. It was an AirTag. I found it lodged behind the rear wheel well, zip-tied and wrapped in electrical tape. Karen wasn't just stalking me. She was tracking my movements like I was a package she regretted not ordering. That was the moment I called my attorney. Within 24 hours, we filed a civil harassment claim and requested a temporary restraining order. My lawyer, Damian Shen, was efficient, calm, and had that dead-eyed glare only seasoned litigators and bouncers possessed. He dug into Karen's past like a forensic archaeologist, and what he unearthed was both impressive and disturbing. She lived in at least 3 different neighborhoods in the last 15 years, and in 2 of them, she'd attempted to form In one case, she fined a neighbor $500, 0 cents, for planting non-Natalie succulents. In another, she handed out lawn review citations during Halloween. She'd been warned, yes, but never prosecuted, never stopped. Damien didn't just build a case, he built a dossier. He requested all available next-door posts, gathered sworn statements from neighbors, some of whom practically begged to testify, and compiled every second of surveillance I had. Then he did something I hadn't thought of. He hired a private investigator. If she planted a tracker, she's capable of filing false claims, he said. Let's find out what she's been preparing. It took less than a week. The PI returned with a chilling discovery. Karen had submitted a title transfer request to the DMV for my car using my VIN. The listed recipient, one Emily Lockley, her fictional niece. My hand shook as I read the scanned copy. It wasn't even subtle. She used my real license plate, her fake name, and listed a sale price of $1, 0 cents, claiming the vehicle had been reclaimed by family. She'd even attached a fabricated bill of sale forged in Comic Sans with a signature that vaguely resembled mine if I'd signed it while blindfolded and concussed. Damien stared at it in silence for a long time, then said, "This isn't obsession anymore. This is fraud with intent." He contacted the DMV immediately and flagged a request as criminal. They froze it, thank God, but it had almost gone through. One more day and I might have spent weeks untangling legal hell. We submitted everything: surveillance, tracker evidence, false title attempt, along with a 22-page complaint outlining patterns of harassment, defamation, and fraud. The judge granted the temporary restraining order immediately, pending a full hearing. Karen was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my car, and my house. But paperwork wouldn't be enough, not with someone like her, because that weekend she wasn't lurking around my hedge or posting online. She'd gone quiet, too quiet. And when unstable people go silent, they're not retreating, they're reloading. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know it would involve a police report in my name, one I didn't file. I assumed the silence meant she'd backed off, that maybe, just maybe, the restraining order had finally pierced whatever delusional fortress she lived in. I was wrong. Instead of barking on next door or pacing near my property, Karen had shifted underground. A week after the court hearing, a detective from the local precinct called. "Mr. Turner," he said, "we've reviewed your evidence, especially the AirTag and title forgery. We've filed for a search warrant." I didn't breathe until he added, "It's been approved." I wasn't sure if I felt vindicated or terrified by what they might find. They executed the warrant on a Thursday morning. I watched from my living room window as 2 squad cars and an unmarked van pulled into Karen's driveway. She opened the door wearing a pink bathrobe and a full face of makeup, like she'd been expecting paparazzi, not a warrant. When the officers entered, she began yelling almost immediately, "You're violating my rights. This is politically motivated. He bribed you." I could only imagine which conspiracy theory she was referencing. An officer on site later told me she attempted to claim diplomatic immunity as a representative of the HOA board, to which the lead detective replied, "Ma'am, you don't even have a board." The search turned up exactly what we feared and more. In her bedroom, investigators found a file box labeled ET Active Case. Inside were printed pages of my social media accounts, screenshots of my Amazon order history, and a blurry photo of me eating noodles in my kitchen taken through my window. They recovered a forged bill of sale for the Lucid, 2 separate DMV title transfer forms with differing signatures, and a printed certificate of custodianship, which, according to Karen, granted her temporary authority over family property in dispute. Family property. She wasn't even pretending anymore. Then came the USB drives, 5 of them, each filled with time-stamped video of me arriving home, leaving for work, loading groceries, walking my dog. There were spreadsheets, logs, patterns, a digital diary of my life through the lens of obsession. But the most disturbing discovery wasn't in a box or a drawer. It was pinned to the wall of her guest bedroom, a massive corkboard covered in strings, Post-it notes, and printouts. At the center, a photo of me getting out of my car. Lines connected it to a VIN number, a floor plan of my home, a grocery receipt, and a screenshot of my license renewal. Above it all, in glittery gold Sharpie, were the words, "The Network." Officer said it looked like a murder board from a detective show, only the crime was me existing in her neighborhood. One officer quietly took a photo for the file, then said to me later, "We've seen stalkers, but this was rehearsed." Karen was arrested on the spot. Charges included unlawful surveillance, filing fraudulent government documents, and attempted vehicle theft. She screamed all the way into the squad car, warning them they'd hear from the Department of Neighborhood Affairs, a department that shockingly doesn't exist. When the news hit the neighborhood forum, it exploded. People who had quietly endured her inspections and mailbox warnings came forward. One man shared a video of Karen measuring his Halloween decorations with a protrator. A retired nurse admitted she'd once received a citation for auditory pollution because her wind chimes were overly expressive. But even with her gone, I didn't feel safe. Not yet. That kind of fixation doesn't disappear just because someone gets cuffed. And as I stood in my driveway, watching the cruiser pull away with Karen inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd left something behind. Not physical, not legal, something deeper. And I was right. because what I found tucked in my mailbox that night wasn't a letter. It was a copy of my own signature scrawled in red ink with the words, "You stole more than a car." The red ink message in my mailbox confirmed what I already knew. Karen's arrest wasn't the end of anything. It was just the beginning of the unraveling. The police traced the handwriting back to old samples in her journal, and while she denied it under oath, the ink on the paper matched one of the glitter pens from her infamous crime wall. The message wasn't threatening enough to warrant new charges, but it was enough to convince the judge to maintain the restraining order indefinitely. Karen was placed on 2 years probation, court-mandated therapy, and ordered to pay restitution for my legal fees, my upgraded home security system, and even the detailing bill after her inspection left scuff marks on my Lucid's paint. It wasn't jail time, but it was the kind of sentence that stings where it counts: her wallet and her ego. But the real aftermath unfolded on the sidewalks and porches of Clearbrook Hills. When word got out that Karen had never been legally affiliated with any HOA, let alone authorized to act on its behalf, people were stunned. Some had quietly accepted her citations out of fear or fatigue. Others had tried to push back but were silenced with legal-sounding jargon and printed letterheads that made her seem official. The realization that we had all been ruled by a self-appointed monarch with a clipboard and a dream was oddly liberating and humiliating. The community message boards lit up. "She measured my Christmas lights," one post read. "She once told my daughter sidewalk chalk was visual graffiti," wrote another. There were memes within hours. One showed Karen's face photoshopped onto the Statue of Liberty holding a ruler instead of a torch. Instead of collapsing under embarrassment, the neighborhood did something rare. It transformed. A group of residents, some of whom had never spoken more than 2 sentences to each other before, came together and formed what they called the neighborhood circle. It wasn't a homeowners association. It had no fines, no bylaws, and no threat letters. Just a shared document with 3 principles: respect privacy, support neighbors, and never, ever pretend to have more power than you do. They started organizing things Karen would have loathed: the front yard book swaps, monthly cookouts, even a chalk the walk day, where kids were encouraged to decorate the sidewalks she'd once patrolled like a mall cop with a badge complex. As for me, well, the shift was jarring. A few months earlier, people avoided eye contact when I walked by. Now, they waved. They asked for lawyer recommendations. One guy even dropped off banana bread with a thank you card that read, "Thanks for taking one for the team and for not losing your mind on camera." I declined the offer to chair anything in the circle, but I did agree to quietly help review community documents to prevent future Karening. In a moment of delicious irony, I also helped them legally register the neighborhood circle as a nonprofit, just to ensure no one else could claim to represent it without consent. Every document was filed properly, with real signatures in non-glitter ink. One crisp Saturday morning, I backed the Lucid into my driveway and stepped out into the fresh breeze. The air was quieter now, calmer, not just in sound, but in spirit. The spot where Karen used to stand and measure my bumper with military precision now held a small wooden sign I'd hammered into the lawn. It wasn't flashy, just stained pine with a simple engraving: "Drive it, own it, earn it, no approval needed." People smiled when they passed it, some even laughed. Later that week, someone added a sticky note under the sign. It read, "Long live the King of NoHo." I left it there. Just once, I figured I could tolerate a little neighborhood drama, so long as no one tried to hand me a clipboard. Sometimes the scariest authority is the one that wears no uniform, just a laminated badge they printed themselves. Karen didn't just fake power, she weaponized it. But here's the thing: real community isn't built on control, citations, or faux bylaws. It's built on trust, boundaries, and a shared love of peace and quiet, and maybe good banana bread. I didn't fight Karen with fists or fury. I fought her with facts, footage, and a refusal to be intimidated by theatrical insanity. So if you've got a Karen in your neighborhood, set your boundaries, turn on your camera, and never underestimate the power of documentation. Ever dealt with a neighborhood tyrant? Drop your story in the comments below. Like, share, and tag a friend who definitely knows a Karen. No HOA? No problem. Just don't let anyone crown themselves queen